What stops some of the biggest companies in the world from powering down? Security. And who provides the security? Hello and welcome to the Boostara podcast. I am your host, James. On the Boostara podcast, we speak to leaders in business and uncover the truths and insights from their amazing experiences. At Boostara, we help businesses boost growth, cut costs, and gain better business insights. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you, type the word growth into the comments below, and I will be sure to reach out. Today, we are joined by the amazing Sam Baker, Head of Talent Acquisition at Control Plane. Hello, Sam. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Good. Well, good to have you on, Sam. Could you tell us? I just joked you look like you're swimming in a sea of white, but where are you calling us from today, Sam?
I'm kind of based in Bedfordshire, so just outside of London, but working from home today. So a little bit more room, and as you said, white background, so it works quite well.
Nice. Well, I mean, for those of our listeners that are not familiar with yourself, they haven't heard of Control Plane before, Sam. Could you just give us a little brief rundown to your journey to where you are today with Control Plane?
Absolutely. So not a kind of traditional career path for me. I was a professional rugby player for 13 years, and I started kind of venturing into recruitment towards the end of that. I started out as an agency recruiter, and I worked at a company called Understanding Recruitment in St Albans for about 4.5 years. And funnily enough, the first ever client I picked up was Control Plane. So I've been working with them as a business for about 4 years, I think, off the top of my head, and eventually got the opportunity to come and work for them full time internally and lead up recruitment for them as head of recruitment. So that's the journey. As I said, it's not your kind of traditional path into corporate life, but often I think sports crosses over quite well with recruitment in general and sales, and being able to speak to people and be quite personable. So it's a little bit of a strange one. But in terms of Control Plane, we are a cloud native security consultancy based in London. We work globally. So we have employees in the US, in APAC, all over Central Europe working for us. And we tend to work with fairly large regulated industries, a lot of financial services, telecoms, healthcare, on working on their security posturing, particularly around Kubernetes and cloud native environments, which is quite niche. And that's where we really stand out with the amazing engineers that we have.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I want to drag out from there. It's really interesting. You're actually not the first professional rugby player, professional rugby player to join the show. But I do want to ask that because you said that there's nice crossovers between rugby and recruitment. Can you explain that?
I think, well, first of all, from an agency recruitment perspective, I think it's a very tough industry in terms of maintaining the way that you perform in that. So I think one of the things you get from playing high level sports is quite a high level of resilience. And I think in your kind of first couple of years as an agency recruiter, it can be pretty brutal at times. There's a lot of rejection, offers dropping out, offers rejected. And obviously in agency recruitment, your earnings are kind of based mainly on commission. So it's kind of eat what you kill, really. And obviously, if you see those deals going down, you see the bank balance for the next month going down as well. So it's one of those where you have to kind of keep on top of your emotions. And I think being able to deal with that is something that's quite prevalent in high level sport. To get to that level, you have to deal with a lot of rejection yourself, but you also have to be resilient and driven. And I think being able to deal with that helps quite a lot. And then in terms of other personality traits, as I said, speaking to people, being quite personable, being able to be quite honest with people. I think in particular in rugby, it's not a kind of environment where people dress things up. You get told very straight. And I think being able to deal with that and also kind of communicate in the right way in that regard is helpful in terms of recruitment. Sometimes you're delivering good news, sometimes you're delivering bad news. That's not a fun part of the job, but you'd rather give the candidates feedback and let them understand the reasoning for their rejection, and be open and honest with them. which I think is key. So
Yeah.
I think those are a couple of the crossovers that work quite well between the two industries.
That's really interesting, and I think for a lot of people, they perhaps wouldn't understand. They see sports and they see sports people as, oh, they have a good lifestyle and they can make money, from playing their game, playing their sport. But when you get to the professional level, the higher you get, the more raw a lot of the skills and the realities are within your sport, within your professional life. I'm not by no means a definitely not a rugby player, you can see from my stature. But I've gotten to a higher level within my sport, never to a professional, but you get how it impacts and changes your characteristics, or your qualities, right? And those are always directly transferable into a working life. But interesting, I've never heard that crossover into recruitment. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I think to your point, I think the higher level you play, I would say probably the less enjoyable it becomes, right? It becomes more of a
Mm,
job. It becomes a lot more serious. Mistakes you're making when you're playing as a kind of 14 or 15-year-old, you kind of just laugh them off. But in
yeah.
a kind of very serious environment, you're getting kind of called out in front of 30 people on a Monday afternoon in a review meeting and asking why you've done that or what your thinking was in a probably a much harsher term than that as well. So, it does build your confidence, but at the same time, there's peaks and troughs for every kind of thing. Sometimes it's not what you
Mm,
expect. Sometimes, there's some really good times in high level sport, but it's tough. And I think that's what kind of builds that character. And I think in sales jobs, particularly kind of sales and recruitment, where you do have to deal with a lot of kind of negativity at times. I think it just helps that
mm.
you have that kind of resilience behind you to kind of deal with it and keep moving forward, really.
Yeah, yeah, and well, especially within the space that you work in, when things go wrong and when things do go wrong,
All the
you've got
time.
to yeah, you've got to be able to keep calm, carry on, find the solution, right? Take action. And I guess, just for clarity, especially for listeners, for you guys, do you work specifically recruiting positions for um these larger corporations, or are you actually finding the solutions for the larger corporations? Are you working as like an add-on,
Um, to an extent, but
or
we employ,
both?
what the model we run is that we employ our own engineers. They work full time for us. Then we would win pieces of business, and then we would, give our engineers to the client to service that piece of work. So
Right.
they come back once it's complete. We have a couple of customers which are a little bit more full time, where we have engineers working for them, relatively regularly. Um,
Mm,
there's only a couple of those kind of instances in some of our really big clients where there are long pieces of work, which obviously dictate a longer period of the engineers being away. Um, but in general, we do everything to own the engineers ourselves. We bring them in, and then we obviously use them to services various different pieces of work, and that's across a various array of skill sets. Really, in terms of we're quite niche, but we have engineers who are a lot more focused on the security side of things. So they're, could be doing threat modeling, penetration testing, a lot of kind of cloud native security. But then we also have engineers who are a little bit more kind of DevOps focused, and they work more on the infrastructure side of things. So they're more
mm.
developing infrastructure for customers, or helping them get ready to be more secure in the future.
Interesting. I guess then, what's the clear benefit for companies to work with yourself rather than just directly find these staff members and employ them as full time? What's the benefit that you bring in that way?
Well, at times, there obviously are customers that have these people in place already. We are very specialised in what we do, and what comes with that is the skill sets that we have in house are very niche.
Yeah.
There aren't a huge amount of companies in the world really who do cloud native security or Kubernetes security as a pure focus. So we're very specialised in that area, and in the last kind of, I'd say, 4 to 5 years, a lot of companies have moved all of their environments into containerization, which obviously comes with its own security risks. So in terms of what we can offer that's slightly different you could go and hire people for the roles and work for you internally. Of course, you could. Um, the skill sets that they have tend to be quite expensive generally as well. So at times, if you're looking for maybe a piece of work doing that requires 4 or 5 of these people on a short-term turnaround, or over a 3-month period, if they were to hire 4 or 5 people, it might take them 9 months, and it might cost them a lot of money, which obviously pushes the piece of work back. There's delays.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously if you work with us, we've got engineers that are ready to go who can service that piece of work relatively quickly. So, and it could be, relatively cost effective as well, for them. And then obviously they don't also have to continually pay those salaries over a long period of time if they hire them full time. So, that's where consultancies have the benefit. You have the specialization in house, and rather than a company having to go through large intricate hiring processes to fill their own seats, often it's a lot easier for specialist agencies to come in and work and do that that statement of work for them. I think that's where we really benefit.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And speed as well. I guess,
Yeah.
if you have to wait 6 months to hire someone, then the actual, the environment, what you needed has probably changed and moved on. And, I guess that's, is that a major trend that you're seeing in the space is just a high, fast development in technology and, updates in needs. Because we've seen a lot of, in the news recently, incidents of cybersecurity breaches. I alluded to it at the beginning, of companies basically powering down because they've had hacks and they haven't been able to overcome quick enough. I mean, what are the trends that you're seeing, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the technologies that these people use are constantly evolving, I would say. To link back to your point, yeah, obviously pushing the work further down the road has its own kind of pitfalls, specifically if it's, regarding security. I think a lot more companies are feeling the pinch a little bit more on the security side of things, in terms of they've become a lot more wary of the pitfalls of what can happen if something goes wrong. I think, as you said, that's only been highlighted by certain stories in the news recently. You talk of Marks and Spencer's. They lost a huge amount of money, millions and millions, over the course of their hack that they withstood. And then, a similar thing to Jaguar Land Rover, which was probably worse because of the downstream effect that had with their suppliers. So it wasn't just them that got affected, it was everyone who was supplying parts or pieces to Jaguar for their cars. And the problem with the people who are doing this is they're also evolving. They're finding new weaknesses in infrastructures that are available to kind of take advantage of. And that's why security really needs to be at the paramount for these companies who are largely cloud driven, because it can be hugely costly for them to kind of suffer this kind of incident. And it's only become more prevalent over the last kind of 12 to 18 months where these things are happening. But it's also making, I guess, executive teams take a little bit more look at their security in terms of what they've got in place and what needs to be improved. Will it ever be perfect? I think there's always probably a way in, to an extent, and that's what you need to kind of keep on top of. So being able to kind of ever evolve and move with the times, but also move with the changes, then that is kind of what you need to do. Because of the technologies that evolving, and sometimes when it updates or evolves, that opens new kind of vulnerabilities within those infrastructures to kind of capitalize on. So that's what you really need to be aware of. And we don't want to see, obviously, bigger companies like that taking those kind of hits, because it's not only bad for those companies and the people who work for them, but also the wider economy as well. So it's a strange time in security, but I think I'm hopeful that it's opening a few more eyes to the necessity around it. And obviously for us, as bad as it sounds, that could be a benefit.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's really interesting, because I was going to ask you, if you could share, an example of a customer, a success story, a case study with a customer that's that's been kind of transformed as a result of your services. But I think that's actually the point, is that it's not so much a transformation, it's it's actually the more quiet it is, the better, right? It's actually the cost of inaction, the cost of not engaging in your services, what that could bring about in terms of the growth of the company, the valuation, investors, all of these the issues. But I'm a question I do want to ask is there a particular size or value of a company that would be recommended to kind of engage in your services? Do they have to be huge multi-million billion dollar companies, or can anyone really approach you for help?
Yeah, I mean, it very much depends on the scope of the infrastructure, really. Where we tend to have the most impact is in regulated industries, where there's a lot of regulation around security, and also they've got kind of wide-ranging infrastructure that has a lot of containerization in it, for example, or a big cloud environment. Obviously, the bigger the environment, the more vulnerability there is to an extent, and there's obviously different ways in. And that's kind of where we have our impact, but that's not to say, if a medium to small size business was looking to kind of use us, then we'd be sure to kind of have that. And we do work with smaller businesses as well. It just tends to be, I guess, the sweet spot which we work in generally is particularly around banking. We have a lot of success in financial services because of, I guess, the security aspects required for that industry generally. And also, I said regulated industries. We work with the government at times on certain projects. So yeah, to answer your question, there's no kind of set size that we aim for. Obviously, the bigger, probably the better for us, usually a bigger piece of work, but there's certainly no kind of limit to what we kind of engage with.
Yeah. And I think you guys do auditing as well, right? So for people that businesses that maybe worry, like suddenly, ooh, I've seen these hacks happening around me. Maybe I should just check out like how vulnerable my company is, right? Or what potentially could happen. That's something that's possible for companies to do with you guys, right?
Yeah, so we do obviously security audits, and then we can do like penetration tests. That's effectively trying to break in and see, and then obviously reporting back to the customer and saying, well, we can get in this way. That obviously then we try and remediate that. Threat modeling, understand where the threats are, and giving them a bit more of an indication of how safe they are or how secure they are at times, and then recommending, remediation for that to kind of fix it.
What are the sort of the common pushbacks or misconceptions that clients, partners have when they first engage with you on their security? What are those kinds of misconceptions?
Not sure, to be honest. Like, I don't usually deal in that side of the business. I think obviously the sales guys are dealing with that a lot more in terms of, to and fro with the stakeholders and understanding the requirements. Of course, price comes into it at times, length of the statement of work. It's not so much about understanding our skill sets and what we can do. I think, we've got a very good name within the space that we work in. So, and we've got some very good success stories. So it almost sells itself to an extent. We don't really there's not a huge amount of misconception around it, I don't think. It's more, negotiation. They can take quite long, obviously, in terms of the sales cycle, just because of the nature of the intricacy of the pieces of work, I guess, understanding what the requirements are, and then understanding the resources available, how long it's going to take, etc. So, to answer your question, I don't know a huge amount about like what, if any, pushback they get, but I don't know. Yeah, probably not much I can add on that, I don't think.
Yeah. I guess it like you said, it is just common knowledge that obviously tactics update, right? And okay, you're going to have this cybersecurity solution installed, but it's not going to last forever. It's not a one-time installation done. You need to be constantly updating, iterating, developing, and keep in contact with services like yourselves to stay safe, right? Because the threats are always going to update. I think that's something that most business owners will be savvy and understand quite clearly, and there probably is no no price to that. You want to keep the company growing and sustainable. You have to invest in this part of your security.
Yeah, I guess one of the pushbacks we may get would be around tooling. So, for example, if a customer has already got a contract with a certain supplier for a tool, and we, do an audit or scoping out a piece of work, and we don't think that's the most effective tool, there can be conversations around that. But obviously, there's contract lock-ins, etc. So, there has to be workarounds in certain circumstances on that. Even if they're not the most effective thing, or we believe they're not the most effective thing, then there's a conversation to be had around that. But that's probably the only thing where there's an understanding, or kind of a lack of understanding, where we need to kind of have a bit of a consultation period around that.
Yeah, interesting. When it comes to AI, what impact are you seeing AI have within your space? From a technological standpoint, I think it would be obvious that AI must be playing some part. But I mean, from the recruitment side, your day-to-day job as well as just the industry in general, what kind of impact are you starting to see?
Well, from a recruitment standpoint, I think it's had a relatively big impact over the last kind of 18 months. Particularly on the market, I would say generally. I think it's becoming more difficult for software engineers to get jobs. If you look at Amazon, I think it was last week, they laid off a huge amount of staff because they've moved some of their teams to be more AI focused. I think that's a worrying thing. I think the potential for them to kind of upskill into more AI services, software engineers aren't going to go away. I think they just need to kind of adapt a little bit. It's not so much, we've been through these phases before where, there's a new role or there's a new tool that's going to change the world. And people think their roles are going to disappear forever. But I think it's just about adaptation. But from a recruitment standpoint, there's different tools that are integrated now. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn who are getting quite frustrated with, sending applications in and getting rejected instantly by AI, who are screening their CVs, so it's not even reaching the recruiter. I don't use that because I don't think it's the right way to do it. I screen all of my CVs personally to understand the person and what they're saying. But I can understand the frustration if, you make an application and within 5 minutes you're rejected with a kind of blank email saying this is why, or you just don't fit because, the AI tools that are used for screening are just picking up on keywords and seeing how they match, right? So it's not, I don't think it's at the maturity yet where you can completely rely on that. From my side, I do use AI in my day-to-day from a search perspective. If I'm sourcing candidates, LinkedIn have got some cool AI features now that really help with your sourcing. So, writing your Boolean search strings and things like that, they make it a lot more accurate. LinkedIn have actually just released a new AI kind of pilot where you can basically throw a job description into it and it, bring you up candidates who are related to that. Again, not hugely mature yet. It's very new, but I think they'll only improve over time. So it's not so much changing the way that you work. I think it just saves you a lot of time on certain things, which I think is a good thing. I think used in the right way, it's beneficial, but you just can't become over reliant on it. You still need to be a person. You still need to talk to people on the phone, have conversations with people, make sure that they're getting a good kind of service, right? A lot of the time people go through interview processes. They might get good offers from the company at the end of the process, but if they haven't enjoyed that experience, the people they've spoke to have not been hugely interested or giving off kind of, vibes where they're not overly enticing to that candidate, and they get another offer which is slightly less money, but the experience was brilliant. Everyone was brought into them. Everyone was giving them attention, really asking and interested in what they do and, what their background is. A lot of the times they'll take the cheaper option, right? Because they want to be somewhere where they're going to enjoy their role and they feel valued. So by kind of taking AI out of that process, I think that enhances that overall experience for them a little bit more. As I said, there's at times you can use it, but I think when you're actually, when you're actually working with the candidate, I think you need that kind of personal touch to, make them feel like they're
Yeah.
part of something. But also you're selling the company at the same time as they're trying to sell themselves, right? So you need to, you know, ensure that they're getting full visibility of the way that we work, the way that we, speak with people, and be able to kind of portray that in the best light possible for them to make the right decision. So, you know, AI will have an impact. It's only going to get more impactful, I think, in a recruitment stance. But at the moment, it's kind of a bit of a crossroads, I think, with, as I said, these bigger companies where they are getting huge amounts of applications just because of the nature of the job market at the moment. You know, there are a lot of people out of work currently, especially in the tech space. So, you know, you put a job application up and there could be 300-400 applications within 2 or 3 days, right? It's a lot of CVs to look at. So a lot of these bigger companies do use these tools to screen through them and pick out the ones that they think are the most applicable. They use it as a time saver, which I get. But at the same time, there needs to be a balance. And obviously, I'm in a smaller company, but we still have a huge amount of applications. But I think it's probably right to kind of give it that personal touch and look through them personally myself. But, you know, if it was getting to the point where it was unmanageable, you know, there may be other options I would look at.
Yeah. You know, you're the first person I've heard say, you know, the recruitment process goes both ways, right? I think that's understandable, but you're the first person to actually, you know, say that. And obviously, we've at times with previous guests, we've talked about how recruiters are using AI, also how candidates are using AI, but always in the sense of kind of like whether it's right or right or wrong, I suppose, for the recruiter to use it in terms of giving to the clients, right? But not in terms of the perspective that it actually leaves with the candidate, the experience that it leaves with the candidate, because I think that's obvious that if you use it and it's becoming a negative, it's taking candidates away from you, then it shouldn't be done, right? Because there's a human element, there's a human nature, a human connection, and we've talked as well previously about the huge value that recruitment brings. I think the understated value that you as a recruiter will place candidates in companies that it will change their life. They might be there for 10, 15, 20 years. They might go up the ranks. They might meet their partner there. They might go live on, a different continent as a result of that job that you placed, that you, helped them find or encouraged them and got them to that position, right? And without that human element, without that care and attention, then that journey can be lost, right? And I think what you say that makes total sense. For it's the human element and also the decision making, right? Anything in between that could possibly be done by AI, I guess, but keeping those two things strong, decision making and the human element.
Yeah, I think it's just about taking advantage of some of the AI tools you can use up for to help with recruitment are really good. But I think it's just about integrating and finding a balance between, what's helpful, but what's actually not taking away from the process. I think more so when I was working in agency recruitment, obviously servicing various different clients rather than just control plane. You sometimes forget that, you're placing these people, and this is a massive decision for them. They're changing jobs. As you said, they might be moving countries. They might be moving somewhere else in England to work. But sometimes as a recruiter, you just see that as a number. You're like, right, if this goes in, that's 25 grand for the business at the end of the month. You don't take into the fact that how much this is going to affect them as a person. So at times you need to have that kind of personable, approach with it, understand, this is going to be a huge decision for them. If they say no, they've probably got a reason for saying no. But you've got to make sure that experience throughout the process is kind of, befitting what you would like to deliver to the client, and also ensure that the client are delivering the same back to them. So, obviously when you're in agency recruitment, you're kind of the middleman, whereas obviously at Control Plane, I'm only hiring for us. So I can sell the company as much as I need to at times. But in agency recruitment, being that kind of middleman, at times you do need the client to sell back to the candidate and be like, right, he's interested, but he wants to know more about this, or she needs to understand kind of where you're going, what you're doing. I think, we could close them, but I think you need to sell this to them. You need to tell them what your kind of plans are moving forward and kind of, converse between the two. So that's, I guess, a difference between internal and external recruitment. But as you said, the process has to come from both sides. It needs to be, almost selling to each other at times, to make sure that there's a fit there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I ask everyone the same question that comes on. So, if you could get AI or automation or any kind of tech to just take over one part of your job function, right? One of your tasks, one of your sort of daily operations, and it's just like that's done, that's taken over. But it doesn't impact what you do negatively, but it impacts positively. I mean, what would have the biggest impact if that could be done, if that could be taken away?
I think probably the sourcing side of things. I think that's the most time consuming thing. As I said, LinkedIn do have some good tools now that help with that, but quite early stages. If it was really sophisticated, it would just go bam, here's perfect 15 candidates, ring through these and see who's available. Before AI, you could be sourcing all day, going through thousands of candidate profiles to try and pick out 30 or 40 to find, a decent shortlist. And that's obviously very time consuming. I like being on the phone more than I do, sourcing through candidates and messaging people on LinkedIn. So that's probably the most arbitrary part of the role. But, it's an important part of the role. But again, I wouldn't want AI to take away from that is, the detail that I kind of go into looking through someone's profile, understanding if they are a right fit, if they work for the right size company, if they've got the right type of background. I don't know if LinkedIn can do that, or AI at the moment can do that well enough to suffice what I would like it to. I still think it's very heavily revolved on keywords, right? So it's, searching through a LinkedIn profile, at times you find people on LinkedIn who don't have a huge amount of detail in their profile, but they're a perfect candidate. So they wouldn't come up in these searches. And that's where it needs a bit of more time and effort to kind of understand, if it's a security engineer who's worked for a competitor, for the last 3 years, but no detail on their LinkedIn, but you can see what companies they've worked for. They probably wouldn't show up if you were doing like a keyword search for skills, because they don't have any skills on that. They just have a job title and a company. There's obviously different searches you can do, but I still think it's probably a better way of doing it, personally at the moment. But if there was any kind of AI tool that really ramped up on how we can source more efficiently, and just went, bang, here's 50 perfect candidates for you, I think that would be the biggest time saver, but I don't think we're there yet.
No, and especially within your field where you are looking for, it's not a general position you're filling. It's they've got to have a specific skill set within a particular technological advancement, right? It's very, very specified. Yeah, and I suppose
Yeah.
not everyone's on LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. And I think, as you said, a job title probably wouldn't suffice in terms of my searches for engineers at control plane, because they are so niche. You need to understand the kind of technologies they work with, the depth that they go into that. Again, sometimes it's not, completely transparent on LinkedIn, but you can get a bit of a feel for it. And I feel that those people will probably slip through the net if they didn't have enough detail in there. So the searches have to be quite specific at times. And I think that's where, I think when AI, it's obviously continuing to improve, day by day, the more training it gets, the more it learns. And I think that at some point there'll be a really, really efficient way of doing it. But as I said, I don't think we're quite there yet. I still think we need some real eyes on those profiles to make sure that they're the right ones. And I think I'd feel more comfortable doing it that way anyway, just for my own sanity.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, speaking of the future, Sam, what's the future got in store for yourself and control plane over the next period?
Well, we're going through an interesting period at the moment. We've heavily, in the last kind of 6 months, tried to become more commercial. in a way. So we've made some hires in strategic commercial positions to really drive our position in the market forward. So we've got a good customer base. Well, we're looking to add to that further with some customers, with ongoing work, and we've also got a product that we sell as well, which is called Enterprise for Flux. So Flux is an open source tool which we have the licensing for, and we've had a lot of success selling that into relatively big enterprise businesses as well, who kind of need that extra support and service from us with regards to that. So really pushing that forward as well, as alongside our consultancy services. And I think over the next kind of 2 to 3 years, we're really looking to kind of grow the business in terms of not just commercial revenue, but in terms of headcount as well. And, usually the two go hand in hand. So, as the revenue goes up, usually indicates there's more work. And obviously to service the work, we need more heads. So, one thing after another. But that's the goal over the next kind of 3 to 5 years, I think, is to kind of continually grow the business, both commercially and from a kind of headcount size.
Brilliant. And I guess, what from both ends, I know you'll speak more sort of the candidate side, but what sort of partners are you looking for, and what sorts of candidates are you most interested in at the moment, in case they're listening?
Well, I'm hiring for a technical program manager at the moment. So that will be dealing with all of our internal projects. And then I think it's very much kind of needs must at the moment in terms of what the business we have at the moment requires. Not sure in terms of how or what positions we'll be hiring before the end of the year after this one. It very much depends on customers closing, etc. There's a few, kind of opportunities that we've got later in the pipeline that, we're looking to close, and that could change things significantly. So it's about planning for that, being kind of proactive rather than reactive, understanding that we might need more headcount at certain times, and being able to kind of plan for that efficiently. So then, if those projects do land, then it's not like panic, hire 5 people. It's right, we've already planned for this. We can kind of get on with it now. So in terms of partners we're looking for, it varies, to be honest. As I said, there's industries that we tend to work mostly with just because of the nature of the business. And we're looking to expand that. And of some of the customers or potential customers in the pipeline are of the same kind of mold of them. So yeah, I think it's just about, increasing our kind of posturing within the space. We've already got a very good name for ourselves. People who work for us are very well known in the cloud native space as well. But increasing, commerciality and increasing headcount, I think is the goal for the next kind of, as I said, 3 to 5 years from the plan that we have. And, all being well, that is what will happen.
Amazing. And what's the best, contact details for anyone that's interested to reach out to you and contact you directly?
Yeah, I mean, just feel free to message or connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anyone who's interested. My email is sam.baker@control/plane.io. So yeah, happy to have a chat with anyone who's interested.
I'll put those contact details below, Sam. But I guess, in summary of the conversation today, some sort of standout insights for me. I think number one, and the biggest one really, is you can hire to have a cybersecurity technician, internally in your organization, but the chances are that's going to be slow and expensive. And one of the things in cybersecurity is that the world is changing very quickly. So if this is a seen problem for you, working with a partner such as Control Plane, it is a no-brainer in that sense. And just in the terms of how things change, you've got a whole, well-vetted, experienced team that will make sure that your company stays quiet in the news and in your your cloud-based software, right? And the services that you offer. It doesn't have to be just hiring. You can actually see, do you have problems, right? We'll do an infiltration test. We'll do an audit, right? So whether you're a big company, hiring internally is one choice you have, but hiring within a Control Plane is I would say, a better choice from this conversation. If you're a smaller company, that doesn't mean that you're not a potential partner with Control Plane. Reach out and see where your problems potentially lie, because it's, as a business owner, it's probably better to know those now than find out later and suffer the worst of the consequences, right? In terms of recruitment, you said it really well. It's a two-way street. Using AI can be good for taking away those monotonous activities for recruiters, but it's making sure that balance between having high impact conversations that can sell your company well, and also the decision making, which really shouldn't be going to AI. Getting that balance right is important. But yeah, amazing insights throughout, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today.
No, I really appreciate it. It's a great chat. And yeah, thank you for having me on. But appreciate your time. And yeah, hopefully it's given you some more insights into, I guess, the security world and the recruitment world and also the sport world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the extra takeaway. Yeah, I find the links between sport and the working world, and I would definitely say between that, with team sports, such as rugby, the amount of transferable skills is absolutely huge. Yeah, when you're competing, especially at that higher level, right? Massive. But no, brilliant having you on, Sam, and I would highly encourage any SME, larger business organization, get in touch with Sam, arrange for an audit, arrange for a conversation, see where the gaps lie within your organization. And if you are a technician, get in touch with Sam so he can get you some good work with control plane.
All right. Thank you.
Brilliant. And everyone, thank you for listening. Please like and share this video so we can get this message out to as many people as possible. Thank you very much.